The Google Pixel 4 is easily one of the most controversial phones of this year, and I totally understand why. While this is definitely a great smartphone in my opinion, it definitely has its compromises. And that does add to why it is such a big question. Like, why would you want the Pixel 4 over any of the other smartphones that exist nowadays? And I do have to say that while this phone has fantastic speakers, an amazing screen, and so many other things that make it so great, it is worth acknowledging why it may not be so good. This review will be coming from somebody that will be using this phone for the next 2 years. I better like it. Introducing the Google Pixel 4. Is it still a good smartphone in 2019? Let's find out. This video is sponsored by Fifine, the makers of some of the best audio gear on a great budget. Like the ones from their C1 models featuring a professional grade lavalier mic and the headset mics bundled together. Links to everything below. The exterior design of this phone consists of glass and aluminum for the most part. It's going to be a glass back and a glass front for the entirety of the build, I would say, and then the trimmings are made out of aluminum. Even though I would have preferred to see stainless steel around the trimmings instead of aluminum, since, you know, it is a matte finish for the aluminum, and then it is very reflective glass for the black model in particular. It is a bit of a mismatch there, but either way, I would still consider this a very good looking phone for the most part. This is the one I decided to go for, but I'm actually pretty happy with the overall build of the Google Pixel 4 in my opinion. I think it looks great as it is. It feels great. You can get this phone in different colors. Obviously, there's the also orange and the clearly white, and those will have a matte finish, and that's really it. I would say that the Google Pixel 4 looks modern and it feels great in hand in 2019. One of the most important features of the Pixel 4, in my opinion, is going to be the display. This one is amazing and easily my favorite in the business at this time. So on the smaller Pixel 4, you're going to find a 5.7-inch 1080 by 2280 90Hz OLED display. Quite a lot being featured there. That is easily the best one in the business, and here's why. Even though, sure, it is just technically a 1080p screen, it looks amazing. Things look incredibly sharp on this screen. Now, when it comes to the display in general, this display just gets incredibly bright. And just the fact that it is a 90Hz display makes navigating through menus and navigating through apps and things like that just feels so much smoother than they otherwise would. Seeing what 90Hz looks on a smartphone, I have to say that I never want to go back to a 60Hz phone ever again, because this feels so much smoother even if it has basically identical specs to the majority of other Android devices nowadays. So I will sum everything up to this. Watching content, navigating through things, playing games, and just scrolling around feels so smooth, and it looks amazing on such a colorful, bright, and smooth display such as the Google Pixel 4's. This is why this display is easily my favorite one in 2019. But I'm fairly certain that this is the only smartphone at this size that offers that sort of feature. Do correct me if I'm wrong. That being the case, this has got to be my favorite. It's just ideal for me. And as for speakers, you're going to have, again, what is easily the best set of speakers that you will find in 2019. Initially, I thought I was going to be very disappointed when it came to the Pixel 4 speakers. However, I was definitely blown out of the water. I thought that because the speakers were no longer front firing, at least not both of them would be, that they would be so much easier to just block out, they probably wouldn't sound as good, or just that the stereo effect wasn't going to be all that great. But I have to say that the Pixel 4 has the best speakers on the mainstream smartphone market. Easily. No competition. The Note 10 Plus has great speakers, the iPhone 11 Pro has even better speakers. However, the Pixel 4, even though the speaker is going to be right here, one of them at the very front, and one at the very bottom, they get super loud, they sound very clear and very punchy in comparison to any other smartphone that you're going to test out. And in terms of specs, you have what is essentially just another carbon copy of other Android smartphone devices of this year. So you're going to find a Snapdragon 855 inside, and you're going to find an Adreno 640 GPU, 6 gigabytes of RAM, even for the smaller one, and you're going to get 64 gigs of storage with the option of getting up to 128 gigs for this guy, and at around a 2800 milliamp hour battery for this version of the smartphone. And lastly, you're going to find a set of cameras, 2 cameras around the back, one of them being a 12 megapixel camera, the other one being a 16 megapixel camera, both of them being able to shoot at 4K. The front-facing camera is an 8 megapixel camera, and when it comes to frame rate, they all max out at 30 frames per second, and the front-facing camera only does up to 1080p. On the back, there's going to be one telephoto lens and the other one being just a standard lens. And speaking of cameras, let's go ahead and talk about the front-facing camera first. Before I get into the bad, the front-facing camera still looks pretty good. It only records video at 1080p, and for that instance, it takes pictures at that size as well. But photos look great. Portrait photography is also still some of the best that you can find in the business, cutting out the subject from the background very well. Maybe not quite as subtle as the iPhone 11 Pro when it comes to portrait photography. That might still be more appealing to others, but I actually really like the way that the Pixel 4 does it here. But now, into the bad. I do really enjoy using the front-facing camera, but it's not my favorite in the business. I do prefer the iPhone 11 Pros thanks to its greater options when it comes to photography and that sort of thing, and the fact that the iPhone 11 Pro supports 4K at higher frame rates than the Pixel 4 does. The front-facing camera very easily on the Pixel 4 is just a one-trick pony. It looks good, but it is far from being the best one in 2019, and that is a huge disappointment. So if you wanted to get the Pixel 4 for the front-facing camera, I would not suggest doing that because you could be disappointed. Now, when it comes to the rear-facing camera, you've got a little bit of a different story. Portrait photos, again, are still going to be the best, in my opinion. Photos look so incredibly sharp when you take portrait photographies, blurring out the background so beautifully while the subject just stays perfectly in focus. Everything is just great about portrait photography when it comes to the Pixel 4. There's nothing to complain about there, for the exception of the fact that for some reason it zooms in a little bit when you're going to switch over to portrait photography, and it means that you're going to have to move further back. Since you don't have a wide angle lens or anything like that, night sight photography is also very good. Taking low light photos still look incredibly sharp, sharper than any other device that I have used to test this feature in the past. So I'm very happy with that as well. When it comes to video, I'm happy that we still get 4K around both cameras, the telephoto and just the standard lens. It's not the best in the business for sure. And again, you are just capped at 30 frames per second. I'm not sure why they decided to make this decision of just giving you up to 4K at 30 frames per second, since you don't even get 24 frames per second, which is actually what I prefer to shoot at for the most part. That is still a very big disappointment. Now, videos still look great, still look very sharp, and stabilization is still out of this world when it comes to the Pixel 4. Especially in comparison to other smartphones. Generally speaking, with everything that I mentioned, it's just not the full complete package, because you can get that out of an iPhone 11 Pro and even the Note 10 Plus. So again, you've got great cameras here, just not the best ones in the market. And they should be the best ones in the market, because this is Google that we're talking about. Pixels have been the best in terms of cameras for the last couple of years, and this year they've fallen behind considerably. And now, when it comes to other features on the Google Pixel 4, there are still some things to talk about that are pretty good. For instance, you have Motion Sense, which is Google's newest iterations, and you can also swipe around in music and videos and stuff like that. However, while the option is there, I actually had to turn off Motion Sense when it comes to using gestures to swipe around songs and that sort of thing, because it would read any kind of movements as a gesture, which meant that oftentimes it was skipping between videos and songs without me wanting it to. If I was just watching a video and I happened to need to crack my neck, it would read that as a gesture and it would swipe video or the song in whatever direction I happened to have to crack it, which was a huge inconvenience. This ended up happening a lot, so I had to turn off that feature. Also, you do get an IP68 water and dust resistance rating, which is pretty nice. It used to be IP67 in the past, but it's very good to hear that now this phone is more water resistant than ever, which means that it makes it safer to use in even more environments, I would say. So that's still pretty good. And now a huge thing to acknowledge here is that the Google Pixel 4 doesn't have very good battery life. The Pixel 4 supports a 90 Hz display. I think it's fair to say that I want to always use my phone at 90 Hz. That's part of the reason why I purchased it. I went into the developer settings to try and lock my screen to 90 Hz at all times, which means that I am aware that the Pixel 4 doesn't have as good battery life because of that. It's always running at 90 Hz all times. And I definitely prefer that, even if it does mean that it is taking a good toll on the battery life. I did this almost as soon as I obtained my Pixel 4. And then, once I'm in school or work or anything of the sort where I might not be using my phone so frequently, by the time that it is 4 p.m., My phone is already at around 30%-ish, which means that I should probably start charging it before I start heading out. I'm not sure why Google would make that decision to give it such a tiny battery, but I do hope that it does get corrected in the future. Now, this is easily going to be the longest section of this video because there's a lot to say. I still have quite a few complaints. I've been using this phone for almost a month, I should say, or well, for the last couple of weeks. And one of my biggest complaints here is that I don't have a fingerprint scanner. Naturally, this wouldn't be such a huge deal because Face Unlock works great. And I can even reach out for my phone and unlock it from different angles and different directions without me necessarily having to pick it up, which is nice. The reason why I miss the fingerprint scanner so much is because Google has done nothing to make sure that other applications, such as, let's say, bank apps, PayPal, or just other kinds of applications that would normally allow you to use your fingerprint, don't work with facial unlock, and I don't have a fingerprint scanner, which means that every single time I have to enter my password. And it sucks having to go from just being able to enter my fingerprint and being able to get in to now not being able to do that at all. I feel like I've regressed, like I've gone back into the past to back when I did used to have to do that all the time because fingerprint scanners weren't so popular. And it's just really dumb that they would do this and that they wouldn't support it. Another complaint that I'm going to have is just the lack of an ultra-wide lens. You've heard this all over the place. I don't use ultra-wide all that often, and I wouldn't even if I did have it. But just the fact that almost every other smartphone has it and the Pixel doesn't, in exchange for a telephoto lens, which I do still use and it is a really good telephoto lens, an ultra-wide lens still would have been really cool because wide photos is probably what I would want to take more than anything else. So that is still a disappointment. Also, the fact that this is capped at 30 frames per second at 4K, that is actually a bigger deal for me, if anything. The front-facing camera also only maxes out at 1080p at 30 frames per second, which is absolutely ridiculous. When the iPhone 11 Pro can do so much more with the front-facing camera than the Pixel 4 can, that is a massive disappointment. I am not sure at all what Google was thinking there, capping the Pixel 4's camera so low when there was absolutely no need for it. Also, again, battery life is absolutely atrocious on the Google Pixel 4. And I don't mean, well, maybe I was exaggerating a little bit. I can still use my phone throughout the day, but I better carry a charger with me all of the time. That's just the reality of owning a Pixel 4. At least if you've gotten the smaller one. Since I have smaller hands, the Pixel 4 XL just would have been impossible for me to use. And lastly, my final complaints are going to be around the storage options, or I should say more so just the fact that we no longer get unlimited backups when we purchase a Pixel. Not only are we capped to, at the minimum, 64 gigs of storage for the Pixel 4 and 4 XL, and at the highest capacity, 128 gigs, when other smartphone manufacturers offer so much more, it is understandable why people would be turned off by that. There's just a lot wrong with the Google Pixel 4 this time around, and as a fanboy, I'm sad to say that. But in terms of complaints, I suppose that that's all that needs to be mentioned. So now we finally reached the conclusion of this video. And I have to say that while the Pixel 4 is not a perfect phone, I will be keeping this for the next 2 years. As a Google fanboy as I am, I like to buy Google stuff. So seeing that the Google Pixel 4 is such a huge disappointment is a true bummer. I can't recommend this to absolutely everybody. However, if the compromises that I mentioned are worth everything that the Pixel 4 offers to you, then that is also perfectly understandable. I'm going to keep the Pixel 4. Because the 90Hz screen at the smaller size is probably ideal for me and I was due for an upgrade. But quite frankly, Google's attitude about why they decided to cap the Pixel 4 is still very disappointing and it makes me not want to support them in the future. Unless they fix all of these things for the Pixel 5 or the Pixel 6, I am probably going to switch to either a different manufacturer or just iPhone altogether, which is something I didn't expect to want to do for quite a while. The Pixel 4 is still a very good smartphone. It's just not at the top anymore, unfortunately, since there are now so many options at more affordable prices that you could go for. So you get a half recommendation from me. So now if you're interested in purchasing the Google Pixel 4 or the XL model, then I will be making sure to leave affiliate links in the description to Amazon. If you use our links to make a purchase, and we do get a small commission that does help us run things a little more smoothly around here. So if you were to do that, we would really appreciate it. Also, we just launched a Patreon recently where for as little as $5 a month, you can join our exclusive server and we would love to chat with you down there. So links to everything in the description. This has been Francisco from Tech Summit. Thank you for watching and I'll be seeing you all later. Enjoy.